What's up, gamers? Before we get into today's video, I got a new mic. Today we will be learning about the Spanish preterite verbs. And if you couldn't tell already by the sound of my voice, I am sick, which seems to be a recurring thing in these Spanish final videos.
Kinda sick right now.
Anyways, back to the Spanish preterite. For those of you who don't know, preterite is a word in English that means expressing a past action or state. Google says that preterite tense, also known as the simple past tense, in Spanish is used to describe actions that were completed at a specific point in the past. This tense is often used for actions that are seen as completed, definite, and that took place over a specific period of time. What this means is that these Spanish verbs are basically one word that describes something you did in the past. In English, we achieve this by just adding ed to the end of all the actions we want to say in the past, such as I jumped, I dunked, or I see. In Spanish, however, this gets a bit more complicated. Sorry. You see, in Spanish, we have to add different endings onto the actual verb while keeping the stem of the verb. For those of you who are lost, let's look at an example. Here we have hablar, which means to speak in Spanish. When we are changing this to the pretérito, we keep the stem, which in this case is habl, or habl. I should have picked a better verb. In the case of hablar, it is an AR verb. ARs follow a certain pattern when changing it to each of the forms. So, now we know the stem, or the beginning of the verb, and we know the ending of each of the forms. So let's see what each of the forms of hablar looks like. For the form of myself, it would be yo hable. For the you form, it would be tú hablaste. For the form of another person, you would say él, ella, o usted habló. For the us form, it would be nosotros hablamos. For the y'all form, it would be vosotros hablastais. And finally, for the form of another group of people, it would be ellos, ellas, or ustedes hablaron. Together, all these verbs mean I spoke, you spoke, he, she, it spoke, we spoke, you all spoke, or they spoke. Hopefully, you are starting to see the pattern here. But you may definitely not be wondering, what are the other types of verbs with a preterite? Well, fortunately, there's only two other regular preterite forms, them being ER and IR verbs. Even more fortunately, these verbs have the same preterite ending. Here they are right now. Oh, what is that I hear? You want to see me use these endings on an actual verb? Alright, but only because you asked nicely. Let's take a verb like beber, for example. Beber, as you can see, is an ER verb. It means to drink. So, you know the drill. We take the stem, which in this case is beb. Sorry. For the form of myself, it would be yo bebí. For the you form, it would be tú bebiste. For the form of another person, you would say él, ella, o usted bebió. For the us form, it would be nosotras bebimos. For the y'all form, it would be bebistes. And finally, for the form of another group of people, it would be ellas, ellos, or ustedes bebieron. In case you were wondering, which I assure you, you weren't. Sorry, I'm having fun with the new mic. Here is a picture of what the endings of a regular IR preterite looks like, and you can see that they are the same as the ER verbs. One thing that I would like to take note of, actually, is that accent marks are important. Do not forget these. Let's go back to the hablar form real quick. Like I mentioned earlier, the él, ella, or usted form is hablo, and you can see it has an accent mark on it, just above the O. If we were to take that away, however, it would just become the normal yo form of hablar, which is important when you're trying to talk about someone else and not yourself, especially when in writing. Another thing to take note of, if you look at the nosotros form of this preterite, you may see that it is the same as the normal form of hablar, which is a common thing shared by many preterites. But How would you know if a sentence was referring to the nosotros now or the nosotros in the past? The answer, my friend, is context clues. When people usually use nosotros, they would use it in a normal sentence, perhaps maybe even with hoy, meaning today. But when people refer to it in the past, they usually say ayer, meaning yesterday, or some other word to signify that it was in the past. By the way, this doesn't really apply to the ayer and er verbs because the nosotros form changes to imos, making the preterite verbs different no matter what form it is. Alright guys, we're nearing the end here, bear with me. The last thing we are going to learn about are irregular verbs. These are the weird verbs, the different ones. If you want to take it there, the special. Okay, I'll stop. Think of it this way. In English, although it is true that you can add ed to the end of most words to make them past tense, there are some words that just don't work the same way. For example, if you wanted to say that you were drawing a picture, you would not say I drawed, you would say I drew. You would not say I eat a dinner, you would say I ate dinner. And lastly, you would not say Mr. G teach the school for a long time. You would say Mr. G carried the school for a long time. But you get the idea, and this is similar to Spanish. For some verbs, they might have different stems than their original, and some of them also retain their endings, just without the accents. Algunos ejemplos son andar, estar, hacer, poder, poner, querer, saber, tener, y venir. I'm spitting bars right now. With this chart, you should be able to see a recurring pattern within each of these verbs. You should see how each of them, although having different stems, still repeat these new stems, and their original endings are in each of their forms. Unfortunately, however, many of these irregular verbs you actually have to learn and memorize, and probably eventually forget. If you do manage to learn and memorize all these verbs, I really don't care. Good job, now you're even closer to being a fluent Spanish speaker. Back to what I was saying, some examples of these other types of irregulars include all of the Spock verbs, ir, ser, dar, ver, and hacer, and these verbs are what I like to call the irregular out of the irregular, as they kind of just follow their own forms in their preterite and are just unique. Might I even say special? Kinda ran out of things to cover, so right now we're going to be doing a little bit of a review. Question number 1. Which is the correct preterite form of the verb ir, to go, in this sentence? Ayer nosotros blank al cine. If you guessed A, fuimos, you'd be correct. Question number 2. What is the correct preterite form of decir, to say or to tell, for nosotros? The answer for this one was actually B, dijimos. If you got it, give yourself a pat on the back. And finally, question number 3, folks. What is the correct preterite form of the verb traer, which means to bring, for él, ella, or usted? Hint, it follows the irregular er and ir pattern. Alright, time's up, y'all. If you picked B, then you'd be correct. And no, it's not pronounced trajo. It's pronounced él, ella, or usted trajo. If you picked D, by the way, see me after class for a treat. Well, in conclusion, people, preterite verbs are weird, but are as important in Spanish just as they are in English. I hope I made Spanish just a bit more bearable, and until then, tienes un buen día.